This is a story that my friend Tanaka experienced. He was a friend from our university days, and he loved to travel. Last summer, he planned a solo trip to relieve the stress of work and decided to travel around Japan. One place that particularly interested him was a small village with the same name as an Italian town called Castelvetro Piacentino. The village was quietly located deep in the mountains of Nagano Prefecture. It is hardly known as a tourist destination, and there is little information about it even if you search online. However, Tanaka was strongly attracted to this unknown place and decided to go. The day he arrived, the sky was cloudy and foggy. The village was lined with old houses, and there was a silence as if time had stopped. Tanaka was overwhelmed by the atmosphere, but he could not suppress his curiosity and began to walk around the village. In the center of the village, there was a small church. The door of the church was open, and cold air flowed in when he entered. Old wooden chairs were lined up in front of the altar, and dust had accumulated on them. Tanaka felt something strange, but left the church without paying much attention. That night, Tanaka decided to stay at the only inn in the village. The innkeeper was an old woman, and when Tanaka asked her about Castelvetro Piacentino, she looked gloomy for a moment, but then smiled and answered, "It's just been called that since ancient times." In the middle of the night, Tanaka suddenly woke up. He looked at the clock and saw that it was past 2 a.m. Sensing something, he opened the window in his room and found a thick fog outside. In it, a vague figure was floating. Surprised, he squinted his eyes and saw that it was walking towards the church. Driven by curiosity, Tanaka decided to follow the figure. When he went outside, a cold wind blew in. The figure disappeared into the church. Tanaka timidly opened the door to the church and went inside. The inside of the church was shrouded in darkness, but a dim light was shining in front of the altar. In that light, the figure from before was standing. It was the figure of a young woman wearing a white dress. When she noticed Tanaka, she slowly turned around. At that moment, Tanaka froze. The woman's face was bloodless, her eyes were hollow, and she felt no life. She opened her mouth to say something, but no sound came out. She just stared at Tanaka with a sad expression. Tanaka was terrified and ran out of the church. When he returned to the inn, his whole body was shaking. The next morning, when he told the innkeeper about the previous night's incident, she said with a serious expression, "A long time ago, a woman lived in that church. She kept waiting for her lover and eventually died. Since then, it is said that her ghost appears in the church." Tanaka heard that story and never visited the village again. The mysterious village called Castelvetro Piacentino was engraved in his heart with deep fear. This is a story about a friend who once discovered an old tunnel while following an abandoned railway line. The tracks had been removed, and the dimly lit tunnel, marked with cracks and rust, was filled with an eerie silence. He and his companions started to walk through the tunnel with flashlights in hand. The humid air made it hard to breathe, and they felt a chill run down their spines. Soon, they heard a metallic sound different from their footsteps from ahead. The sound sounded like a huge machine rubbing metal against metal. They looked at each other anxiously and cautiously approached the source of the sound. In the darkness, my friend's flashlight dimly illuminated a huge steam locomotive on the tracks. However, the locomotive was clearly abandoned, rusted, and parts were missing here and there. As my friend cautiously approached the locomotive, he noticed a black figure moving in the driver's seat. The figure was only vaguely visible, but it was clearly not a living human being. The friend and his companions were terrified and ran out of the tunnel as fast as they could. Behind them, they heard the loud metallic sound of the locomotive and the sound of the windows shattering. They escaped the tunnel, jumped out onto the road, and ran for their lives. They finally caught their breath and shared their fear, but none of them returned to the tunnel that day. A few years later, the friend visited the tunnel again. However, there was nothing there. The steam locomotive and the black figure had disappeared as if they had been an illusion. This is a story I heard from my friend Yamada. He works as a bartender at a popular bar in downtown Osaka. One night, Just before closing time, a middle-aged man came in. The man looked tired, and as soon as he sat down at the bar, he ordered something strong. Yamada recommended the bar's signature cocktail. The man downed the cocktail in one gulp and ordered another. As Yamada made the second drink, the man began to mutter to himself. "I can't forget her face." Yamada asked, and the man said he was the perpetrator of a traffic accident. The victim was a young woman who died instantly. The man said, "I dream about her face every night." By the time he ordered his third drink, the man's behavior was becoming strange. He started to sweat like a waterfall and roll his eyes. Then, suddenly, he shouted, "Ah!" and pointed to the entrance of the bar. When Yamada turned around, a young woman was standing there. However, upon closer inspection, the woman's figure was somewhat distorted and the outline of her face was blurred. Yamada couldn't believe his eyes. At that moment, the woman slowly approached the man. The man trembled and repeated, "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." When the woman was right in front of the man, she suddenly disappeared. At the same time, the man lost consciousness and collapsed to the floor. An ambulance was called and the man was taken to the hospital. He was later diagnosed with acute alcohol poisoning. Since this incident, every time Yamada makes a cook tight, he remembers that night. He can't help but feel as if there is a shadow flickering in the cocktail that is visible but not visible. Yamada said, "It may have just been a hallucination, but I still remember the image of that woman clearly." He then changed the way he makes cooked tate a little. "It may be my imagination, but with this recipe nothing happens," Yamada said, laughing, but there was a shadow in his smile.
ガステルレトロピアチェンティの街の明かりきらめく夜、歴史に溶け込む夢、遠い記憶見せる場所、ペンシルバニア鉄道 S